Welcome, everyone, to our coffee chat on AI bias in hiring. I am thrilled to have with us today people who are able to look at two aspects of it. One is specifically employment attorney, adjunct law school professor, and author of Disability Discrimination in the Workplace, Gary Phelan. Some of you a year ago may have remembered Gary coming and talking to us about workplace discrimination generally. He's going to be talking about the law of algorithmic bias. And also with us today is executive and career coach and co-chair of the Colorado Commission on Aging's Workforce Committee, Kate McLagan Bond. So if I can ask you all to join me in welcoming them, and we're going to go ahead and have a wonderful chat about this topic. I'm Janine Vanderburg, a co-founder of Changing the Narrative, a longtime anti-ageism initiative, and also CEO of Encore Roadmap. These days, I'm focusing on my role in educating employers and anyone who will listen, actually, on the very strong business case for older workers and intergenerational teams, helping Encore seekers create roadmaps for what's next, and helping also create businesses that leverage our experience, talents, and connections. And of course, continuing to advocate for age-friendly public policies. For those of you who have joined us in an Encore Roadmap coffee chat before, you know the drill. They are open to the public, so anyone is entitled to join. If our guests agree, and these two guests thankfully have agreed, we are going to record, and you'll find the recording within a week on my YouTube channel, and I'll be putting a link in the chat. Queue up any relevant questions that you have in the chat, and we'll be taking as many as we can. Please engage, if you will, and stay until the end. The intent of these sessions is to make sure that you meet other people who care about these issues and begin conversations that continue past this session. If you are able to, if you're in a setting, please keep your video on and share resources and respect in the chat. So if you know of other resources related to this topic, please go ahead and put them in the chat. My one requirement as a result of something that happened last year is please don't start arguments with each other in the chat. We're all here to learn from each other, and we are going to be polite and respect each other. I want to thank you all so much for being here today, and let's go ahead and get started. Gary, we're going to start with you. What is algorithmic discrimination anyway? And a few people ask, how prevalent is it? Or is this a thing? What percentage of employers are actually using AI in their initial screening of applicants?
Algorithmic discrimination, a new cutting edge issue that we're hearing more and more about, is where AI platforms and tools are being used to screen out applicants based on, it could be age, race, gender, without a human ever reviewing their resume. It's only really becoming, it's been happening, but I think the case we're going to be talking about, the Workday case, that's really sparked a lot of interest, certainly in the last few months after the case was, or after the court in the Northern District of California granted class action certification to the plaintiffs in that case. But it's essentially where historical data, or it's called learned bias, is being used, where the AI platform will look to what are these successful employees in this workplace. And if it's younger employees, then they will focus on younger applicants in their screening in order to essentially forward or send that where it gets beyond kind of the invisible gatekeeper. And let's say an example might be if 2% of the workplace is over 60, 20% of the applicants are over 60, they're going to screen out the overwhelming number of them. And often the question is, how do they know? Because most people on applicants' applications, it doesn't say, tell us how old you are. It's through the use of proxies. So that can be graduation date. It can be the years of experience, even down to the terminology used in the resume, or what technology they say they're proficient in. And that's from those it can detect and extrapolate how old the person is.
And this came up at a conference I was speaking at lately, and it was a question that actually came up from hiring managers. Is it true that increasingly people are just simply skipping over hiring managers and simply letting the algorithm make that cut of who gets brought on for an interview or that kind of thing? What have you seen about that?
The estimate is from various studies about 99% of employers, large, medium-sized and larger employers, are using AI tools in the hiring process. And
So it is really prevalent. Then. I
right.
mean, it's a thing. It's a thing.
So it's definitely not anything unique to this one workday, which we'll talk about later. But it's as many as 75% of applications there's never a human that ever looks at that individual resume or application. So the platforms are essentially making the decision whether that person gets beyond the gate and will even be considered.
Okay, so I'm just going to say that's really frightening. But let's go ahead and talk about the law about it. That's what you're here for. So you mentioned Workday. There is a major age discrimination case pending in California, alleging that Workday algorithms discriminate against older applicants. So just tell us about what is Workday anyway, and tell us a little bit about the case.
Workday is a platform that does a variety of tasks, one of which is handling all of HR issues for many employers, everything from the application process to payroll. And they're very popular with respect to larger employers. 65% of Fortune 500 companies use Workday in some capacity. And the primary reason for which they're used is with respect to applications. And so what Workday will do, what happened in this case, and I think it's a good example because one of the questions that people ask is, how do I prove it? I got turned down. I don't know why. But the plaintiff in that case, who was over 40, was sending applications and realizing he was being turned down within minutes, often, or certainly within a few hours. So then he decided, okay, I'm going to submit my application in the middle of the night. And he was still getting rejected. So that's when he figured out, okay, that there must be something here, and went to a lawyer. And through that one case, that's really what started what is now this large class action that there's beliefs that it may end up with over 1 million potential plaintiffs or class members in the case. So the size of the case is potentially enormous.
Okay, that sounds crazy. So you're an employment attorney. You
Right.
specialize in this area. Why? And I know that one of the big questions that has come up about this case is Workday is just the algorithm. It's the application. It's not actually the employer. Why is Workday being sued instead of the employers who are using Workday? Is that one of the issues in the case?
Yeah, yes. And what Workday, why they're being sued is as an agent of the employer. And so
Tell us what that means for the non-lawyers here. What does it mean to be an agent of the
good point. It's where the employer hires some sort of third party in order to carry out a function that they're responsible for. So the employer is ultimately responsible with respect to hiring. But when they essentially delegate out that task to someone who is working as their agent with whom they have a contract, then in that case, that agent may be responsible for any sort of discriminatory behavior. Now, in this case, what the issue with algorithmic discrimination, most of the time it's not intentional. It's not like the major employer said, we don't want any applicants over 60. But so the AI platform is essentially learning that data. But then that gets into the difference between disparate treatment, disparate impact. Treatment is where it's intentional, but disparate impact is where it has the effect of discrimination, even though it may not be intentional. And this is a classic case of disparate impact, where if the overwhelming majority of applicants who are older are being screened out, then the effect is discrimination, regardless of whether the agent, in this case, the AI platform, or the employer, whether or not they ever intended that to be the result.
Okay, that's crazy. And you've been citing some really large numbers. if somebody here or somebody who listens to the recording later feels that maybe they've been discriminated against by Workday, or they've applied to a job with a Workday platform. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and I constantly hear from people who are saying, okay, submitted the application and it is less than 1 minute later and I've already gotten the rejection. If
Right.
somebody feels they're in that case, is there still an opportunity for them to join this Workday lawsuit, and what would someone have to do?
Yes, there. It's right near the deadline, though.
Okay, tell us
You
about that. What's the
called
hard and fast deadline?
March 7th, 2026.
Oh,
And there's the deadline for filing. And it's very easy form, one-page form. You go to workplace or workdaycase.com. And I've gone to it, very simple. If anyone that's filled out an application, submitted it through Workday as of September 24th, 2020, they may be a potential class member. And all somebody has to do is go to that page, fill out the application. It's very simple. Then it goes to we'll go to the law firm that's handling that case, a California-based firm. That's how they would go about pursuing it.
okay. And let me ask you, can I ask one of maybe our guests here to go ahead and look up that workdaycase.com and put it in the chat so that because here's what I know, if I do it, I will accidentally discontinue everybody and we will be at the end of our Zoom. And we still have lots and lots of questions. Thank you, Cassandra. Appreciate it. Okay. You've talked about, and you mentioned disparate treatment and disparate impact. So disparate treatment, I get. If I look at you, Gary, and I say, I think you're over 40 and I don't want anybody over 40 in my firm, that's disparate treatment.
Correct.
Disparate impact, what would be an example of how that kind of plays out? And how do we know if we've been subject to something that has disparate impact when it comes to age?
You wouldn't necessarily know initially. For example, when somebody gets rejected, you don't know necessarily why that happened. So disparate impact often occurs not individually, but collectively. For example, where I see it the most in my role as a lawyer who represents individual is with respect to reductions in force. And under the Older Workers Benefits Protection Act, the employer has to provide the ages and job titles of those kept on and those let go. And that's done really. So do you see a trend of older workers who were the ones who were selected for termination? That would be an example, even without any evidence of that they intended this to happen, where if it looks like there's a disproportionate number of older workers, then it may be disparate impact. The effect of a workplace action, in that case, a reduction in force, had a adverse impact disproportionately on older workers.
Okay. But it also seems that might be harder to prove. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And particularly with respect to hiring, and I wanted to point out, within all the areas of employment law, the hardest thing to prove is discrimination in the hiring process. And that's everything from the fact that there is inherently, it's easier for an employer to avoid liability because they say that person didn't interview as well. But this other person, maybe they were less qualified, they had less experience, but they just interviewed better. That's why one of the cases with respect to hiring that I've done in the age area was it happened to be a public sector employer where they had to keep all the records. So it turned out when we finally, during the discovery process, we wouldn't have known this case of this initially, but we were able to get records that showed that my applicant, who was 30 years older than the person who was hired, actually scored higher in the numeric rankings of the various applicants. But that's rare. So it is hard. And I don't want to discount the fact that it's hard to prove. And a lot of it sometimes it's just based on a feeling based on what the nature of the questions are. But I think it's the sort of thing where if you think it might be a factor, probably go to see an employment lawyer.
And Gary, and if you can clarify this for me, my understanding as well is that in some jurisdictions, as a result of Circuit Court of Appeals decisions, that the Federal Age Discrimination and Employment Act was determined not to apply in the hiring process. Is that right?
Never heard. That may be. I'd never had that happen to me,
I
or
don't think
maybe
in
it's
your
just a certain.
yeah.
Yeah, because
I
ours. Yeah, but it's certainly possible, but definitely look then to the state law with state discrimination laws. Generally, they're the floor.
Yeah.
And so many states, more so admittedly with blue states, where the state laws are more protective and have better rights for employees.
Gary, we're getting some questions that are very specific about this Workday case. So I'm going to go ahead and cue those up now, if that's all right with you, as opposed to waiting till the end. Maggie's asking, is there a way for employers to select options in the Workday algorithm that reduce or eliminate the bias? Great question.
So, well, that's getting into a question of what can be done now that it's becoming much more prevalent. And there's been a surge in the last month or so I've seen of employers all of a sudden offering their services to assist AI platforms as well as employers. You can design platforms that screen out the proxies so they can't take the proxies into consideration. I don't know necessarily with respect to Workday, but I assume they're similar like other AI platforms. So I think we're going to start to see that develop, particularly now where employers may now be realizing that they've just handed this off to, because what drives AI is cost efficiency. Okay, we can save money. Now that they're realizing that they may potentially be sued for something that they really didn't intend. So I think they're going to come up with ways to do it. Exactly how they're going to do it, other than doing everything from making sure that the AI platform is not screening out based on proxies. The second thing, it's just called the human in the loop, to have a human being somehow that sort of looking at whatever the AI platform is doing.
Yeah.
So I think and then there's other ways, for example, for the employer in their contract they have with the AI platform to say, you have represented that you do not discriminate in any way based on age, race, sex, or disability, or any of the other protected characteristics. So I think there's going to be a reduction in it. But as far as what's happened in the past, I anticipate you're going to see a surge of litigation over the next couple of years.
It just seems like all of a sudden, this is what everybody is talking about. Adriana is asking, is this mostly relevant in the US or also for Europe?
Question. Workday is worldwide. They are huge. I know just this morning I was seeing how this has become a big issue in Australia. So I think it is worldwide. Whether every country has different employment discrimination laws, I don't know how much of an issue it is in the other countries, but the discrimination laws seem to be something we still export here. So I think it will start to get more coverage, particularly with Workday being such a major AI platform for corporations around the country.
Yeah. Karen is asking, if this is happening with Workday and there are other kind of similar firms, is it likely the same thing is happening with others? They haven't been sued yet?
Right. Because remember, with employment discrimination, first you have to file administrative claim. You can't file in court. You have to exhaust your administrative remedies. Generally, that means waiting at least 6 months. I think part of it is people just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Because I do a lot of work in the age discrimination area, and I've had so many clients who say, I can't get an interview. Mm-hmm. I never thought it might be that it's because of the AI tools that may be screening them out. So I think there's just more of an awareness now. And that's why there may be cases that might be being filed. It's going to take a while until they percolate, because there's generally not publicity of administrative cases. It's not till they're filed in court.
Yeah. And a really interesting question from Donna. Is there a list of Workday company clients available, or will it be released? It would be fun to know before you apply for a company, are they using Workday with the discriminatory algorithm?
No, I don't know of one. It's just going to suggest going on AI to find them. But there are some: Target, Walmart, Amazon, Salesforce, Netflix, Bank of America, large employers. So it's almost like, who isn't on the list?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and then, okay, I know there are questions that are queuing up. So, what can we as job applicants do about it? So, we're going to turn to you in a moment. But, Gary, you had also been talking about it. I actually read an article that you wrote about it. There's been a lawsuit using not age discrimination laws, but consumer protection laws to challenge the use of AI platforms to make hiring decisions. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that case and why it's relevant to us?
Case called, or it's against another platform called Eightfold. And they are, again, an AI platform. And what they would do is create kind of profiles of individuals based on their applications. But it would be more like like running a credit history. They wouldn't be able to. So the lawsuit that's been filed by a firm out in Golden. I was a partner there back 20 years ago. And it's saying if you are going to use this information, you need to, just like any other credit history, it was done really in a secretive way, that you have to give the person notice of what's being told. You have to have the right to challenge it. And so how their particular AI platform was being utilized out in Golden is now filed a class action, again, in California. There is, I know that New York Times had a huge story about it about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So it's also consumer protection laws. Like in Connecticut, we have a powerful tool called the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act. And we think, we don't have a case yet, but in basically when looking at this, that there might actually be a claim under our state consumer protection laws, where you're engaging in deceptive practices and or unfair practices or practices which violate public policy. So it's another area to explore, and it provides another incentive for employers to stop doing this.
Okay. And Kate, I'm going to switch to you because so thank you all for continuing to put questions. I'm going to ask Kate a couple of questions about what do you do if you're a job applicant? How do you position yourself and that kind of thing? And then we'll keep going to the questions that are building up in the chat. And thank you for doing this. And what I may do, and I'll prevail maybe on Gary and Kate, if we can't get to all the questions that you're queuing up, I may prevail on them to just maybe send me some notes after that we can send out to everybody if that's all right for you too. Okay, so Kate, it's clear that even though the law is starting to challenge, we know that AI bias is real, the algorithms are real, and we know that especially older people are sending in resumes, getting automatic rejected. What are some of the issues that you're seeing? Because I know one of the things you do is coach experienced talent about how to position themselves. What are the issues that you're seeing, and what should experienced job seekers be doing in face of this?
Yeah, thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me be part of this. I've been coaching career candidates for 30 years. I also have some HR consulting, so I see both sides of the desk here. I do want to say that I am seeing younger applicants in their 20s. I'm seeing all generations have issues with submitting their resumes. So I just want to say, to be fair, that everyone is experiencing this. Whether it's AI or not, I'm not sure. But like to Gary's point, some people are getting rejected within seconds. So I can only that there might be the deal breaker. But like Gary said, the AI piece is an automatic tracking system. So if the company's using that, I think there's a stat of at least 75% are being rejected immediately. And I think the key thing that I'm seeing, and I had to do a lot of research on this myself, both I used AI and I also interviewed a lot of my clients that are all different generations. And I interviewed some of my colleagues that are talent management, HR specialists. So I think some of the key things that I'm seeing and hearing is that the key words in your resumes are not matching the job description. So for example, if it says customer service is essential, or if it says project management like 5 times in the job description, then we need to pay attention to that instead of putting a different, your definition or spin on the term.
So, Kate, can I just interrupt you for a moment?
Yes.
So, if we're going to be using AI, would a smart thing be to throw the job description into an AI tool and maybe compare it to the words that you have in your resume?
Or you can change the keywords in your resume and throw your resume into an AI tool to see how it comes out. So, for example, I have a brand new client, an older adult who has in her very first profile statement over 20 years experience, fill in the blank. And I told her, you have to take out the over 20 years, which I have to take it out of mine also. By the way, I just noticed that it's still in my LinkedIn and my resume. So if there's a bias towards ageism, then we've got to take out 20 plus years or over 25 years, that type of thing.
Okay, let me ask you this. How do you highlight if some of your really relevant experience is from 20 years ago? Is there a way that you can, like you worked for a major company or you learned or some big accomplishment? How can you highlight that without putting the actual dates? Like, how do you put the full spectrum of your relevant experience without putting those magic words, the magic disclaimer words of like over 20 years?
Yeah. And again, for the audience, this is a fairly recent phenomena. So it's still a new thing for us as coaches to help people verbally and in writings answer to what you just said, Janine. My new coaching mantra is stop defending the number of years of experience that you have and start articulating what those years produced. So you're going to have to say things like, I lead with judgment, or I specialize in high stakes situations. I'm a trusted advisor. I've had a lot of experience with turnarounds. I've got an expertise in transformation. So it's not stating the number of years, and make sure you're taking those numbers out. Take the dates off of your resume from jobs that were more than 15 years ago. Go back only 10 to 15 years. The way you describe past experience is just say early experience and then put a summary statement. Another question I got recently is, how do I explain a gap? If you took some time off to caregive or take a sabbatical, you need to address that in 1 to 2 sentences, because AI will catch the gap and spit you out just on that item alone.
Okay. Good to know. What else? Are there just specific, one of the things that I heard about recently at a conference that I was at was, so you can do this with your resumes, right? But if there is like an online application system and you are forced, one of the things we know in Colorado, and I think some of us here were involved in getting this bill passed, that employers cannot ask for our age or graduation dates on initial job applications. But somebody raised the issue of, okay, but if I'm forced to put those dates on a resume or an online application, then I may not be putting my college graduation date, but if I'm forced to put the dates of my first job, any recommendations there? I haven't figured this out yet, Kate, so I'm not picking everybody. I'm not picking on you. Okay.
No, I understand. When I've talked to a few talent management people here in the Denver area in the last month doing research for this, they all said, try to get contacts, try to find people within an organization that you're interested in case that is the case, that you have to fill in some dates. Try to find a different sort of window or door opening into an organization, especially if you really want to work there. You're qualified when you're set on it. But I've been saying this for 30 years, and I've had people tell me all these decades, I didn't get an interview. I haven't heard from anybody. The stats are that there's at least 85% of us that get our jobs in the quote unquote hidden job market. So if it's at least 85%, if not more, you've got to find avenues and contacts and people to get around this date requirement or that resume application process.
So even networking. Yeah, no, I think we're all trying to figure this out together, right? Both from a practical point of view and also from a legal point of view. A kind of a related question, I think it was queued up by somebody who registered, and I'm seeing a variation of it in the chat as well. Okay, so let's say we do that. Let's say we shave some of those years off our resume and we just highlight our relevant experience, but we get into the interview and they look and they're like, okay, you're an old person. Joking, everybody. How do you deal with that sort of bias And one of the things that was interesting to me, we used to have on our Changing the Narrative team, a woman who was an amazing social media guru. But she related the experience. She was in her 60s, but she had gotten her college degree later. So when she put her college degree on, people thought, oh, young person coming in. And then she would show up for the interview. How do you deal with interview bias when you show up?
Again, you've got to do some research before you go in there in terms of what matters to the company and make sure the job description. So do some research on that company and what's going on. You've got to know based on that, what you bring to the table. Your experience is worth a lot of money. It's economics. It is a step forward for them as far as working with teams. So if you've overseen different generations of teams and you've managed budgets and departments, you've got to do your homework on yourself and present really good quantified examples of where you have excelled and make sure that's tied and connected to the job description and their culture and their environment.
Yeah.
That
Well,
to do with ageism, though. I'm
I
sorry.
Yeah, I don't know, there's many different examples of how that happens, but as much as you can pound on your experience and what you bring to the table and your value, that's where you have your leverage.
And
I
I think
don't have
that
control over the person who looks at me and sees I have gray hair or wrinkles or whatever.
And so I think here's to me what's important. And I talk a lot about this in kind of the fight against ageism. We've got to be fighting this on multiple fronts. So part of it is all of us who are either job seeking, coaching job seekers, need to be doing the best that we can, the best that we know how. So it's why people like Kate really work with experienced workers to help experienced talent to help them position themselves. It's why I encourage people to start your own business, because if you're going to deal with an ageist job market, just go, I call it build your own boat. What I know from my years in consulting is people may be ageist in hiring, but when they want a consultant and they want someone they know can solve that problem. So you're not looking for the least experienced person. You want the person who has the most experience solving your kind of problem. So that's one level, right? We're trying to take care of ourselves. The other is the legal avenue, the kind of things that Gary does, and making sure that we are holding employers accountable whenever we can. And then the other level, and this is why I think it's so important for all of us, whether we've experienced ageism or seen friends, colleagues, parents, children experience ageism, we need to champion better and stronger workplace age discrimination laws. And we all need to do that so that we're not, we need to take care of ourselves the best we can, but we also need to use legal means as well. So that's why I'm such a champion of working on the public policy front, and a number of people here. That's why those of us who are part of the Colorado's Older Worker Policy Collaborative worked really hard to get that graduation date bill passed and that kind of thing. We're working on some legislation this year. Those are the important things. I want to go back. We've got about kind of 20 minutes left, and I've got a bunch of questions in the chat. So I'm just going to
before we do that, I'm sorry. I am so sorry that it unmuted me. If you don't mind, I just want to just state one thing.
Yeah.
The ageism thing, it's also, just so we're talking about that, I just wanted to bring that up. When we talk about that, it's not about just people that are looking for jobs and there's the things. It's also about people who are in certain situations where they want to work and people they think, oh, they're going to retire
right
in 2 or 4 years. That's all I wanted to bring up. So
yeah.
I will.
No, and Delilah, you were absolutely right. Ageism has we've done a lot of programs on ageism. Those who want to dig deeper I've kept our Changing the Narrative website up. Ageism can be we're talking today specifically about AI bias in hiring, but we also know, and I've actually got on the YouTube channel, we had Gary here a year ago that talked about ageism across, including when you're in the workplace, when you're getting pushed out and that kind of thing. So there are a lot of elements. Thank you for bringing that up. We recognize it. And what we wanted to do today was really just talk about this particular element because anyone who's met me knows that I can talk about ageism for 1 week straight without stopping to pause to take a breath. Delilah, I'm not sure where you're from. We should get together and have coffee.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and talk about some of these workdays. So Tom brought up, I guess he went to the link that you suggested, Gary, and he says the site opt-in states that you are bound by favorable or unfavorable judgment. And Tom's question is he at risk of paying fees if the case decision is unfavorable?
Usually not. In employment discrimination cases, generally you're not. They're done as contingent cases. And so I can't, because I go not
You're
handling
not the
case.
lawyer on this case. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. But I think the opt-in, Tom, my reading of it when I had looked at it earlier was more that it was that if you opt into this class action case, you wouldn't later be able to, and there was an unfavorable judgment, you wouldn't later be able to sue as an individual. That was my interpretation, but I'm not the lawyer on this case either. Okay, I'm looking of Sandy. So I will share these in a follow-up of Sandy has provided list of who is using Workday. So thank you.
Right.
Karen Brown is asking, did he say eightfold? Yes, he did say eightfold, and I know why you're concerned. Let's see. Sandy is saying using ATS will give applicants maybe a 3% chance of being seen. Best to target a company or target a person in a company where you want to work. Exactly what Kate was saying. Renee
You
says,
having audio issues?
I'm not is anyone having audio issues?
No.
Are we good? Okay. Let me go back. Renee says, I'm hearing from recruiters that they are on to applicants who are using AI to keyword match to the job posting. Kate, is that a thing? Is it a no-win situation?
I think it depends on the HR folks and their values around it. I've talked to some smaller size employers recently, and they said it was clear that job applicants were using AI to write their cover letters and resumes. And so their point of view was, negative in terms of that. Like it wasn't original or the kind of verbiage that they would have preferred. And how they're handling it, I'm not really sure. I guess that's where a human steps in. But I think the main thing is if we go back to some of the basics here, like a PDF gets rejected, graphs and fancy fonts and so forth gets rejected. So there's a lot of variables here, Janine, and everyone that needs to be considered.
Yeah. And I really consider this the beginning of a conversation, not the end. Like I said, it was literally Gary and I were exchanging information about something. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, we've got to have Gary on a coffee chat to talk about this because all of a sudden everybody is talking about it. Somebody noted in the chat, Mitch, I think it's important to remember that ageism applies to folks on the younger side of the spectrum as well. And I think that's really important as well for this discussion. For this reason, Builder they've done a survey for a couple of consecutive years about what hiring managers think about age and hiring. And what was stunning to me was 2 years in a row, overwhelmingly hiring managers said they wouldn't look at anybody over 60, but they also wouldn't look at anybody 25 or under. What does that say? And when you think about it, how stupid that is, and I really feel like we need to be allies for each other. How stupid is it for an organization to say, we're not going to bring in any younger talent? And we know that's really a thing right now with AI. People are making the assumption that AI can do any entry-level job, so you're not bringing people in. How are those people going to be developed if we don't? So we're pushing out the older, we're not bringing in younger. And who that leaves are the caretaker or sandwich generation in the middle. It's when I talk to employers, I just call it stupid, and because that's the way I talk. Okay, I've got, Gary, a couple of other questions for you. One of the terms that I've been hearing lately is this term AI washing. Can you tell me what that means and why it's important to know about?
Yeah, I think it's important just because Or if at the end of the year, particularly November, where so many employers were laying off people, and that's continued, inevitably you'll hear we're doing it due to AI related layoffs. The general consensus is that's covered. They're not giving other reasons. We weren't profitable last year. That's why we're laying off people. That it sounds impressive to investors, to shareholders. And so it's being used as more of an excuse that it's not really happening. Also, that what may be happening is they're laying off people, but then you're seeing people hired back, but often younger people, and paying them less money. So it's fraud to try to explain decisions that are being made in a positive way might sound impressive. So that's being used, I think, much more often these days. And now that term is becoming exactly what it is, I still think it's going to continue, because what happens when a major employer lays off somebody or has a major layoff, that's the reason given. And so something that usually is going to be seen as something negative is seen as positive. Oh, they're becoming more efficient. That's why they're doing it.
Yeah. Although to me, what's interesting as well is that we also have all that data that's been emerging that shows actually companies who've even done massive AI adoption aren't seeing those kind of productivity gains and everything
Right.
that they thought. So it's still a mixed bag. I want to make sure that we talk about what maybe positive signs we see in a regulatory environment and what kind of negative signs. So for example, Colorado a few years ago passed an AI bill that in part touched on algorithmic bias in hiring. It was passed. It was due to go into effect February 1st of this year of 2026. There was pushback from tech companies and others. It is maybe the implementation date got pushed back to June of 2026 with the idea that people would potentially work on it, come up with some compromise. I'm just wondering what kind of trends that you're seeing maybe anywhere in people trying to address this AI bias, algorithmic bias in legislation, at the same time recognizing that there's been an executive order on the federal level that says, nope, we're not doing that. Feds are going to take care of it.
I think
Can you solve that problem for us, Gary?
Yes, in 2 minutes. We have the problem of the federal government saying don't touch AI, and there's a team at the Department of Justice that's threatened to enforce if any state enforces laws that go beyond what they believe is appropriate. At the same time, states are really interested in this issue. Right now, there's 47 states that are at least addressing the issue of various state regulations involving AI, including with respect to hiring. One of our Connecticut state senator, his name's James Maroney, has been one of the leaders of this. One of the things when I talked to him about it is what they're trying to do is really coordinate their effort. So it's not just a hodgepodge of different states. What amazed me about it is 47 states means there's a lot of red states that are also involved in this process. And I think that's an encouraging sign that states are recognizing that this is an issue. I think so far 5 states, including Colorado, have passed some sort of legislation, but still there's a lot of resistance to it because AI is investing a lot of money in now lobbying and pushing back the sort of you're trying to impede progress. But now there's I think a growing backlash against AI. I think you're going to see a lot more activity on the state level.
Yeah. Do you know, is there like any one organization that's taking this on to coordinate efforts? Because as much as I love seeing things happen in the states, it would be lovely if we could go to one place and see best practices that different states are doing. And anybody who's on this call, because I know we have some experts on this call, if anybody knows of anything, just go ahead and pop it in the chat. Because I know in Colorado, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do you do that balance and maintain, quote, a business-friendly environment and a worker-friendly environment and that kind of thing. And it would be lovely to see and learn from some states that are getting this right. If anybody knows. Okay.
No.
This is something else we have to do and advocate for. Yes, I'm adding something else to my to-do list. Let me ask you this. Steve is asking a question. This isn't necessarily AI specific, Gary, but I think it's an important question generally for workplace age discrimination. What if you live in an at-will state? I'm in Colorado, which is at will, and they don't need a reason to let you go or who they hire. Thoughts on that, dealing with workplace age discrimination in at-will states?
Well, I think virtually every state is an at-will state. You can't terminate someone for an unlawful discriminatory reason. So a lot of it, in an age case, there's various factors. What I always think, I encourage people to, if you feel like you're being discriminated against based on age, to start to take notes. To contact an attorney, I think, is also very important. There's a national organization I'm part of called NELA, National Employment Lawyers Association. And NELA.org is their website, and they will be able to connect you with employment law practitioners in every state around the country. There's about 3,000 lawyers in the organization. And those are where we spent an hour a year ago. So it's a pretty complicated topic, but certainly that's one of the most important things, I think, if you feel like you've been discriminated against based on age, to go to an attorney. One of the things I want to point out, though, really quick, and this is on our topic, is the Workday case actually isn't the first case on this issue involving algorithmic discrimination. They're actually, the EEOC in the past administration filed a lawsuit called iTutor. And in that case, the employer expressly told the AI platform to exclude any applicants who were female and over 55 and male and over 60. And so what I thought was interesting, and the case ended up settling for $365,000 on behalf of 200 applicants. What was interesting is how that case came about is the person also just was suspicious of why they were rejected so quickly, and then put it in that same application, but a different birthday, and they got an interview. Through just that one app, they were able to a class. That's
You can't
again
make this
something
stuff
that could
up,
be
can you?
considered.
Yeah.
Nope. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that we're not going to see any cases likely from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in this administration. Suing my providers or employers, I don't think is on their priority list right now.
I think you're right. Okay, so Eddie asked a question that is not AI specific, but I'm personally really interested in, and I'll tell you why in a moment. He said, I have a community member over age 50 applying for internships for a total career pivot. Many companies have a requirement to be an enrolled college student, and that almost immediately screens out. Obviously, some companies don't have that requirement. Some have returnships, but they are few and far between. Here's why. So, Eddie, great question. Here's why I'm really interested in it. I just saw a few days ago that LinkedIn, right, the big career platform, is doing a grant program to train people on AI. But to be involved in this grant program, you got to be between the ages of 18 and 24. I'm actually going to write about this tomorrow in my ageism newsletter, but I was like, wait a minute. The future of work is intergenerational. We know we need to have people working together. Why would you just do a training program for people age 18 to 24? So if you want to weigh in on that, Gary or Kate, and specifically about Eddie's question about internships that have age boundaries, or say you must be a college student.
Yeah,
What
go ahead.
I'm experiencing right now, I coached executive MBAs at a very wonderful MBA university here in the United States. And I've got a dozen right now. Half of them are military veterans, and all of them are in their mid to late 40s getting their MBAs. They are having a really hard time finding work. And so my suggestion, because the companies say you don't have a technical background in whatever it is. And so I've urged them to try to find some kind of an internship, like an executive internship. So we're trying a spin on finding an open window or a contact in an organization to ask and request for this. And also I'm having them write bios. So I just wanted to say that out loud to some people. A bio might be a better tool to present yourself than a resume, because you can summarize that wonderful experience and those gold nuggets about yourself. But how you get past something that specifies the age, I think it's got to be a person, and finding some contact that will help you pave the way.
Okay, thank you. Gary, thoughts on internships being limited
Yeah,
to
it's like,
people
I
under a
think if
certain age.
somebody walked in with that claim, I'd file it also on disparate impact. It's unlikely that they intend to. That's again a classic case of disparate impact. If they're not likely not intending to discriminate against older individuals, but it's having that effect. With respect to LinkedIn, I'm stunned, but it's not employment discrimination because they're not the employer. They're not an agent, but boy, is that bad. And I look forward to posting and repeating whatever you write because
It will
they
be
ought to
in
know
my
that.
Ending Ageism newsletter tomorrow,
Okay.
which has a
Okay.
section called Blind Spots. And I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they just weren't thinking about it correctly.
Well, they should be because if they're a leader in that space, they ought to know better.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do a final quick question and then I'll do a wrap up. So this question is from Niccolo, who wants to know, does AI scrape things like a portfolio, visual portfolios? And Niccolo is a brilliant architect friend of mine who I think recently posted on LinkedIn this beautiful house that he had designed some years ago. And then I think reached out and said, oh, am I in trouble because I posted this thing that I did some years ago? Does AI scrape that sort of thing?
No, but I would almost assume so.
Yeah.
If it's out there, if it's accessible, chances are it does.
Okay. There we go.
My knowledge is resumes and also the interview, by the way, which we didn't touch on, Janine. There's a lot of folks going through an AI sort of avatar interview, which is a whole nother discussion and preparation.
Well, I will have to have you both back. Kate, we've got time. Do you want to give your 30 seconds of best advice on interviews?
My best advice is have a very good elevator pitch that has a brief intro about something about your expertise, some gold nuggets in the body of it. What are your talents and gifts? It's that transformation piece or the expertise you have. And then the conclusion of what's the transitional goal that you're aspiring to or the value that you add to the company, and make sure it's tied to either the job opening or the company's values and what their purpose is.
Okay. And I want to end the session with Aaron White's comment of a pipe dream. I love this so much. Let's form a nonprofit funded by grants and donors where people age 60 and over can be employed it just popped up in my chat, to coach people who are 25 and under. That would address how are they going to be developed, question for young folks, and give experienced folks a chat to keep working and earning. Only half kidding, Aaron. I am not kidding. Let's chat about that later. Everybody, thank you so much. Please join me in giving a round of virtual applause for Gary and Kate for giving their valuable time. I so appreciate it. This has been recorded. I will be editing it, putting it up on YouTube. I will send everybody out a link as well as some of the links. If you do think that you've been affected by Workday, do go ahead. Don't wait for me to send out a follow-up email. Go to workdaycase.com and go ahead and join the lawsuit. I really appreciate this. Is, again, an emerging topic in the whole ageism space, and really grateful to have people who are thinking deeply about this on it, and for all of you. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks,
Thank you, Janine.
everybody.
Thank you, Janine.
Bye.